It's the seat of all human emotions. You think with your minds, you feel everything from the heart chakra. You really do. And even though the heart chakra is not really where your heart is, it's slightly off center to that. Or actually, it is center. Your heart is toward the side. The chakra itself is dead center. And as I say, that has the bearing on so many things within our lives. It really does. And the bottom line to a lot of that is, I always say this to people, you know, the past is the past and you can't change it. From now to the end of the universe, it wouldn't matter how many lives you live, you will never change one event that's ever happened in your lives, whether it be good, bad, or whatever. You can't change it. Of tomorrows we plan for, don't we? You come to college, you're doing all the things of life for your tomorrows. You're building your tomorrows. But in reality, no one's tomorrow is ever promised to them because we just don't know. That's life. And so the reality of your life is today, this day. And when you wake up tomorrow, it's tomorrow. And that you should cherish that day. You should do the best you can for that day. And when you go to bed at night, like when I go to bed at night, most of my days are hectic. And I always say it was a great day. It was a good day. I accomplished something today. And if I have one of those days where all I want to do is to sit on a Chesterfield and watch movies all day long and eat potato chips, I'm not going to blame myself at the end of that day and say, what did I do to my body? And start. Because you see, what you start doing, you turn switches on. I truly believe this is what happens to people. It's like the commercials we hear and see on the television. How many commercials, one after another, are telling you everything that's going wrong with you? How many? All of them. And they tell you to take these pills that are going to improve the quality of everything, and then they run a list as long as it's telling you all the problems it's going to create. But at the bottom line to that is, but it's going to improve the quality of your life. Even though it might give you a heart attack. It doesn't matter. And what happens is that a lot of people will actually turn a switch on within them. You see, I've got cancer cells in my body, just like you do. But whether cancer ever develops in me, I have a lot of control over that. Because if I believe that I am getting cancer, because my mother had it, and her mother had it, and who knows who had it in our family, and guess what? I'm going to get cancer. Because I turned that switch on. No, when I hear those commercials, I mute it, I turn it to another station. I refuse to hear those things. Now, I'm not endorsing what I'm going to say to you next. I'm really not. This is my own personal life. I think the last time I went to see a doctor was almost 20 years ago. No, I don't endorse that with you. I really don't. Because you see, in doing what I do and have done, I have worked on, I wouldn't even know how many hundreds of people I've actually worked on. And if I can't walk my talk, if I can't do the very, very things that I say to the audiences that I lecture to and the people that I work on, if I can't correct things going wrong in my own body, then I would say my life is meant to end. I accept that fact. I'm not going to be barraged by chemotherapy and radiation that is destroying many good cells in my body to do what? To give me what? No. For me, David, no. I have lived an incredible life. I've accomplished amazing things in my life. If I had the chance to live my life all over again, I would do it time and time again. I really would. I would take the good and the bad, and I would embrace life to its fullest. I really would. And so, as I say to you, if I couldn't heal myself knowing that something was going wrong, because my body will actually be telling me that, I am so in tune with myself that I know when something is not quite right. But you see, when you get a pain or an ache, instead of reaching for your Tylenol bottles, why don't you sit down and ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me here? What happens if you hear a strange sound in your car that you haven't heard before? Do you try to analyze it a little bit here? It's the same with us. Your body is a miracle. A miracle. And you have such powers that you probably don't even realize. You do have the power to either heal yourself or actually to destroy yourself. And many people do destroy themselves on an emotional level. They really do. So, having said that, I want to, just before I get into the tuning forks, I want to give you a little bit of perspective of where I come from, and my background. Because when I it's obvious by my accent, you would already know that. I originated from England. I came to Canada in about 1963. I was born, believe it or not, I know probably some of you are going to look at me, some of you might think I'm pretty ancient, but some of you may not understand, I'm actually going to be 72 years of age at the end of this month. When I was born during the war years in England. And I clearly remember terrible explosions as a child. And this is why I say to you these childhood memories. Like fireworks today, I can't stand fireworks. I can't stand explosions because of the explosions that I heard as a child. And walking out the next day and houses that were once there. Nothing, just bricks, nothing. That was my playground as a child growing up. There wasn't such a thing as green fields to enjoy and play in. It was bombed out buildings and finding dead bodies. That was my childhood. And back then, there weren't the books that you can buy today from metaphysical bookstores explaining chakras and healing and the spiritual and things like that. There was none of that. But my mother was a very gifted person as far as spiritual things were concerned. Like I was overhearing a few conversations when I first came here about astral projection and things like that. My mother could do things like that. And some of the stories that she shared with me at a very early age were, again, like that foundation that I talked to you about of your emotional house. And she was already, without me basically being, how can I put it to, bombarded, that's probably a good word, with what my mother's beliefs were. It was more that I would have to go to her and ask her to share her knowledge with me. She never forced it upon me. And that really rings true even in my life today. That my wife and I have very good friends that have no idea that I even do this work. Because they would never understand. And so what is the point? What is the point in rubbing my knowledge down people's throats who really are not interested? But if they are, the knowledge is shared. And at the end, I encourage you, if you want to ask me questions at the end of this lecture, I encourage you to do that. You know, I'm very pleased about one thing here, and that is the age of you people. That there's a thirst for knowledge. This has only really started happening in the last few years. I've noticed more and more. It wasn't that way. But people are looking for alternatives in life, and this clearly is one of those. But with my mother, a very interesting thing happened that I want to share with you. And I think it was probably one of the most transforming things that happened to me. And that was when I was probably, here we go again, about 5 or 6 years of age. My mother collapsed one day on the floor. And they took her into a hospital that she couldn't move at all, her back. It just totally gave way. And when they came in to take her to the hospital, they put her on a flat board, took her to the hospital. And at that time, whatever tests they ran on her, they ran every test they could run to find out what the problem was. Meanwhile, they hadn't moved her to a mattress, soft bed. She's on this wooden board. They didn't know. The medical profession did not know what was wrong with my mother. And she was in such pain that my father, he was beside himself. And, you know, and I don't know if this went on, I don't know how long it went on. And every time he would ask, what is wrong with my wife? They didn't know. And he heard about a man a man by the name of Mr. Elbaz, that's what his name was, that this man was a faith healer. And he approached this man and said, and explained what had happened. And Mr. Elbaz said, you know, I would love to try to help your wife, but unfortunately, I'm not allowed to come into a hospital. You see, back then, things like that were totally frowned on. And it was only the persuasion from my father that finally convinced him in the end to say, all right, I will come in. I will come in pretending that I am coming to see your wife, not that I'm doing what I'm doing. And when no medical staff are around, I will see what I can do. And that's exactly what happened. When the nurse disappeared, this man put his hands on my mother's back. Even though she was laying down, she couldn't move. He brought his hands round her spine. I don't know how long he left his hands there. I wasn't present, and I was very, very young at the time. He took his hands away and said, Mrs. Bell, sit up. And she said, oh, no. You don't understand. No, I can't. I can't move. Sit up. I order you to sit up. Well, it was in him continually saying this to her, she finally sat up and moved her body, her spine, and there was no pain. A nurse happened to see this by this time and ran to the bed and said, Mrs. Bell, what are you doing? What are you doing? Lay down, lay down. You're going to hurt yourself. My mother was cured. And the medical profession had no explanation as to why all of a sudden my mother could move. That had such a profound feeling with me that it was something that I was so drawn to that I wanted to help people at that early age, 5, 6 years of age. And I actually started laying hands on people, or my mother in particular, I should say, later on, if she had a migraine headache or something like that. I'd put my hands on her, and my mother would say, David, you have no idea the power and energy that is coming out of your hands. They're on fire. And her migraine would be gone like that, you know. Another beautiful thing about Mr. Elbaz was that he had a clinic. And when you walked into his clinic, there was a box. And it had a little note on it saying, you give only what you can afford. He never charged people for his services. And that also blew me away, that he was offering whatever he was doing for mankind free of charge. When we live in a world today where it's all to do with money, 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 money. Anyway, from that time on, I don't really have a lot of memory of how much I did with hands-on healing. All I know is I was very drawn to it. And then another strange thing happened. Do you know when children say that they have a friend and they talk to, oh, I'm talking to George over here, and parents say, don't you think aren't you grown up now that you shouldn't really be doing that? Wrong. That is a spiritual guide that child is talking to you. Each and every one of you have spiritual guides, whether you know that or not. You do. You absolutely do. 2, usually with everybody. When I do this work, there can be thousands around a table. Thousands. They don't need walls, ceilings. Spirit can come through anything. It doesn't even need to be invited, and it can be here as quick as that. Absolutely, it can. And about that time, I started experiencing things when I would go to bed, that the wall that was closest to me would suddenly move way out into the distance,